Divine Christ Blessed. I'm Chef Shauna, and I'd like to share some tips for making successful unleavened bread. It's best to start with room temperature eggs and butter. But if your eggs aren't quite there yet, or you forget, just simply cover them with some warm water and let them sit for about 5 minutes. Now, another great tip is to aerate your flour. Just fluff it up a bit so that it's not compacted down. Now you see I have my drained room temp eggs and I'm gathering all my ingredients. Today I'm going to make a 2-for-1 batch. I'm going to take one single batch and I'm going to split it to make 2 different flavors. My flavor profile will be citrus and lime, and then my second one will be blueberry with white chocolate. Now, however you choose to bind all of this together, you can either do it by hand or in a mixer. Just make sure you don't do anything that causes excessive aeration, because yes, your eggs can be a leavening agent if they are aerated enough. Now, if you prefer a fudgier type brownie textured unleavened bread, melting the butter will help you to achieve that. But if you like your bread more fluffy or cake-like, it's best to use softened butter instead. Another tool I really love to use is a rubber spatula. It will get every drop. And as you can see, I didn't let anything go to waste. I used that excess butter to butter my little dishes. You could even use parchment paper instead. Now, I have my eggs that are nice and room temperature, as I have brought them to temp with warm water. It's a great tip to crack them in a separate container. That way, if there are any shells or a bad egg that may have a blood spot, you're able to fish that out without ruining your entire batch of unleavened bread. Nope, no shells, I'm good to go. I'll use that same bowl to make my liquid mix. Don't forget to wash up. Now, I prefer using the creaming method. This method uses the alternation of liquid and dry ingredients. So, I'm mixing my eggs with about a 1/4 cup of milk. You can use any milk of choice. I like using 3 eggs. I have a 1/4 cup of milk, and I'm going to add a tablespoon of vanilla and a couple of tablespoons each of lemon and lime. My base bread will be citrus. Now, if you like a little bit of variety, I recommend you using one single batch and making it a neutral flavor that you can manipulate to split into 2 different varieties. This is what you'll see me do here. Yes, I have a baby on my hip. He was fussy. Alright, so here I've combined my liquid ingredients. Don't be alarmed. My liquid mix may curdle slightly because of the reaction of the citrus with the milk, but no worries. Now, if you are using a standing mixer, it's best to use the paddle attachment. This way you can avoid aerating those eggs. Yes, eggs aerated can be used as a leavening agent, so it's best to use either the paddle attachment or a wooden or sturdy spoon if making it by hand. Keep in mind, angel food cake is only risen by egg whites, so you don't want to cause that same effect in your unleavened bread. Now, we'll keep moving. Fluff that flour so that it's not compacted. That's what I'm doing here. Then, it's best to tap and scrape with a level edge. This will make sure that everything goes down into the cup and that you're getting an accurate measurement. Sifting isn't necessary, but it'll certainly help get out any clumps or particles. Sifting also helps to further aerate the flour. hope you like it. Let's see.
Making homemade baby food is so simple. Just blanch, chop, and strain organic veggies of your choice. Remember to keep it neutral and bland. Babies don't need all the extra stuff. Also, avoid high allergen foods. You don't want to cause an allergic reaction. Now puree it to your desired thickness, keeping in mind the age of the infant. Now fill your pouches and remember to fill it shy. I would fill maybe 2/3 of the way so baby has room to squeeze without making so much mess. And just like that, homemade baby food is done. Yum, yum. I hope you like it. Yummy, yummy.
I'm using the base mix that I was taught by my senior sisters, which is a mixture of 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups of sugar, 3 eggs, and 2 sticks of butter. I like to add 1 tablespoon of flavoring, a pinch of salt, and any additional additives like lemon zest, berries, or even chocolate. It's really up to you. Don't forget to tidy as you go. As I stated earlier, I like to use the cake method, where we cream the butter and sugar together and then assemble the dry ingredients separately from the wet and then alternate adding the 2 of them together into the cream, butter, and sugar mixture. I know it sounds confusing, but I find it to be one of the best ways to ensure that my unleavened bread comes out great and that there are no lumps or clumps, and it also ensures for a nice fluffy crumb. So, here I am assembling my dry mix. I have my flour, which is 2 cups of all-purpose flour, a pinch of sea salt, lemon zest, and lime zest. And I've already created my wet liquid, which was a combination of 3 eggs, vanilla extract, and lime juice, along with about a 1/4 cup of milk. Now, when I'm making a citrus-based bread or an unleavened bread that has a wet additive, I like to hold back on the milk so that I can make sure that the flavor profile is where I'd like it to be. In this case, since I'm using citrus, I like to leave a little wiggle room to add more lime or lemon juice just in case it's not punchy enough. And if more milk is needed afterwards, I'll add a splash at the end. Now I have all my dry. I'm just going to give that a little stir and set this aside. Now, it's completely unnecessary to sift the sugar, but I have found a few brown bits, which is probably some solids from the cane sugar. So it is good to do. Today, after sifting, I had some coarser grounds of sugar, which are kind of like the turbinado sugar, and I'll just use this to sprinkle over the top after I've assembled my unleavened bread. Another chef's tip. A little sprinkle of sugar on top before baking will ensure that your unleavened bread has a nice crusty topping, if that's what you like. And of course, baking it at a lower temperature will ensure that as well. If you bake it at 350 degrees, you will not likely achieve that crusty top before overbaking the bread. So proceeding with our cake method, I am creaming the butter and sugar together. I find that whether I start with melted or room temperature butter, I still prefer to do this process. Now, I'll begin alternating a bit of flour, combining that in, and then adding a bit of the liquid mix. All of this is being added to that creamed butter and sugar. If, for instance, you were adding something like cream cheese to your mix, a good time to add it would be during the cream, sugar, and butter process. That will ensure that it's well incorporated. Sometimes the cream cheese just doesn't want to blend in very well, but another thing to help with that is using room temperature ingredients. Let's not forget to scrape down the bowl in between additions. We don't want a big clump of flour at the bottom of our bowl when we're all done. So this is another great tip that will ensure that your unleavened bread is well incorporated. Continue this process until all the dry and liquid ingredients are used. Don't forget to scrape one last time and give it a quick mix. I like to taste the batter to make sure that the flavor profile is right. If it needs a bit more extract, I add it here. In this case, I needed more citrus to give me that punch. I want it to be obvious that this is a lemon and lime unleavened bread. Besides, using something acidic will help cut the sweetness of the batter and give you a better balanced result. I also like to add a bit of sour cream or mayo or even cream cheese to help ensure that my cake crumb is nice and fluffy after baking. Here I've added mayo. I know it sounds so gross, but if you've ever had a super moist chocolate cake, it likely had the addition of mayo in the batter. I'm going to mix to combine all of that once more, and I'll probably end up adding a splash more of some form of dairy. Once you know what your batter consistency should look like, you'll be more successful. Hands-free now, no baby in tow, and I can keep pursuing through finishing this unleavened bread. I'll also do a final scrape around the bowl to ensure that I didn't miss any flour along the way of mixing. Just about ready to pan it up, I'm just going to add a splash more of dairy. That is moisture. Nice. Now, I'm doing a twofer. I started with the base mix using the lemon lime for both my unleavened breads. So I'll pour half into one pan, and then I'll use the other half to add a bit of something different so that I can get two flavors all in one. I'm pouring up half of my lemon lime base, and to the other half, I'll add a bit of lightly coated blueberries and white chocolate. If you're adding in any fruit, chocolate chips, or any sort of solid component to your unleavened bread, it's best to coat it with a little dusting of flour. And what that will do is help them stay suspended in the batter so that you will see blueberries and white chocolate throughout, rather than them all settling at the bottom. It will also help to absorb the extra moisture from the fruit as it bakes so that you don't get big wet spots in your finished unleavened bread. Combine well, and there you go. Now don't be alarmed. If you use frozen berries, your batter may seize up just a little bit, meaning it will get a bit tighter. So work quickly, get it in the pan, and level it out. Give it a little tap to ensure that there are no air bubbles, and you're almost ready for the oven. At this point, I like to preheat my oven. Now, there have been times when I have had to rush and crank that oven up to 400 degrees to finish my unleavened bread, but that is not my preferred choice. In such a case, you will still achieve a crunchy top without overcooking the unleavened bread though. But if I have the time, I prefer to bake my unleavened bread at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Get your oven preheated before putting it in there so that it does not overcook. Before baking, I level it out and I like to add a fine dusting of sugar on the top. That's when that coarse sugar comes in handy that we sifted earlier. There weren't any brown bits in there, so I am okay to use it. What that will do is give me a nice crusty top. I personally love when the unleavened bread is soft and fluffy and moist on the inside and crunchy and crusty on top. I decided to go the extra mile and add a pinch of salt and lemon and lime zest to the lemon and lime one. This way I can easily tell them apart and give it that extra bit of punchy citrus flavor. Here we go. As these are half size, they bake for about maybe 30 to 35 minutes at my 325 degree oven. And in the oven they go. You want to test the center by either plucking out a little bit with a paring knife or poking it with a toothpick. It should not be wet. It should give a nice tight crumb, but with a little bit of moisture. That way you'll have a little room for carry-over cooking, as it will still cook just a tad while in the pan. Moving right along, I decided to make a nice glaze to dress it up. To keep things in theme, and so that my unleavened bread is identifiable, I'm also adding lemon zest and lime zest, as well as their juices. I added a splash of vanilla too. Here's the trick with glaze. Start with all your flavor additives first, because it does not take very much liquid to dissolve that powdered sugar. It's very fine. Once the flavor profile is right, then you can begin to add in your dairy of choice. I've used heavy whipping cream. And if by chance you add too much liquid, just add more powdered sugar and whisk until the consistency is smooth and to your liking. Just like that, the glaze is complete. I'll just put on a lid so that it doesn't get crusty while our unleavened bread bakes. Nothing like the smell of freshly baked unleavened bread. Now I like to apply my glaze when the unleavened bread is just a little warm or fresh out of the oven. The warm bread will help as an aid in spreading the glaze. Now I plan to add on a bit more citrus zest to this particular one so that it's identifiable. I like for people to know exactly what they're about to bite into. For my blueberry white chocolate, I'll just give it a little drizzle. And there you have it. Delicious unleavened bread, one batch, two flavors. Now let's recap. Here are some tips for success. Fluff your flour. Scoop it into your measuring cup, tap and scrape. Use the correct measuring tools, dry cups for dry, and liquid pitchers for liquid, as they vary slightly in volume. Start with room temperature eggs and butter, and even cream cheese if you plan to add that. Try implementing the creaming method, where you cream the butter and sugar together, and see if this will help you, as it's done for me. cream the butter and sugar until fluffy, and then alternate adding the dry mix and the liquid mix into it, remembering to scrape in between. Coat berries or solid ingredients in about a teaspoon of flour to keep them suspended. And don't bake it too long. Pull it out just shy so that there's a little room for carry-over cooking, because those pans are still hot and your bread will continue to bake just a bit more. You can always test it by plucking out a little bit from the center using a paring knife, and you can easily tap it back down in there and nobody will ever know. I hope these tips help you. I'm confident that you too can make a beautiful pan of unleavened bread. Yum. Enjoy.